So let's look at this one. So yeah, we have quantities.
Mr. Duncan, the previous one, you said you wanted to talk about something
Yeah,
on the
it's the
last
GDP
question.
deflator, which is also in this one. So I thought it's better I do this one. All right. So inflation is a sustained rise in the general prices, in the general price level of goods and services. It is measured using price indices. In your economy, three goods are produced and consumed by consumers. These goods are stamp, sugar, and granules. So the table below gives information about the prices and quantities in 2020, 2021, and the base year. So we don't know what the base year is. It can be any year, but they just wrote base year. Sometimes they will tell you that 2020 or 20 this is the base year. But this one, we don't know what the base year is, but it's just the base year. So it says now required, calculate real GDP and nominal GDP. So when you're calculating real GDP, it's price times quantity for all of them. So if you're using the real GDP, you use the quantities of the base year, right? And if you're using the nominal GDP, so nominal GDP, maybe it's because it's the simplest one. So it says calculate the real GDP and nominal GDP for 2020 and 2021. So you can see here we have what quantities and prices, right? So these are the prices, quantities for the base year. So if you're using, for example, if you're calculating real GDP, a nominal GDP rather, so nominal GDP is just GDP that does not account for the effects of inflation. So nominal does not account for the effects of inflation. So GDP is calculated at current prices, or you can just GDP at current prices. So in terms of the formula, you're just going to have the summation of PI, QI, where PI is the current price, and then this QI is the current quantity. So in that particular year, okay? So for example, you look at for the first one, if you go back here, what is our quantity that we are having? So you can take a look at, for example, it's nominal GDP for 2020. So we just focus on 2020 and we get everything for the current year. Okay. So what we're going to have is for the 2020 for the current year. What's 2020? 2020 is right here, this column. So we have sump, it's 35, and then the price is 2.5. So it means you say 35 times 2.5. Then you put these in brackets. Then we say plus. That's what this summation sign means. So we say 35 times 2.5. So it will be 35 current quantity times the current price is 2.5. Put in brackets like this. That's what the summation means. Plus. That's the plus, right? So you go for the other product. The other product is sugar. Current quantity is 4. Current price is 5. So we get plus 4 times 5. Then we say plus. The last one is nuts, right? Which is the 2020 quantities is 20. We have 50 times 22, right? Quantity is 50, price is 22. So we'll say 50 times 22. Then you add them up. 50 times 22. Yeah, so you just get this and punch this on the calculator, then you get whatever number you get is the nominal GDP for 2020. Meaning if you go for GDP for 2021, we'll do 30 times, is this 2? Yeah, 30 times 2 plus 5 times 10 plus 50 times 25, just like that for all of them, even for the base. We've just been taught for 2020 and 2021. So that's how you calculate the nominal GDP. Now the real GDP, slight difference. Real GDP, you keep Now, real GDP is GDP that takes into account the effects of inflation. All right. So how does it take into account the effects of inflation? What you're going to do is with GDP, you will need to have quantities constant. Is that okay? Quantity has to be what? Constant. Then let the prices change. So in other ways, if you get the formula, we're going to have current. You're going to say real GDP. This is GDP that takes into account inflation. So now real GDP will be equal to, you say the summation of PI, which is the current price, times the initial price, rather it's P naught times QI. So this just means current quantity. Then this one here is the initial, or we say the price in the base year. Okay, so you get the prices in the base year. Current quantity is what you have. So this, for example, let's calculate for 2020. Our real GDP for 2020. So look at 2020. What's the current quantity for SAMP, for example? It's 35, right? Okay, so you get 35 quantity times what's the price? So you ask what's the price of SAMP in the base year? So the price of SAMP in 2020 was 2.5, but we are not interested in the 2.5. We're interested in the price of SAMP in the base year rather. So you can see the base year here is, the base year price for SAMP is 1 quarter. So you're going to say 35 times 1. Okay, because 1 is the price in the base year. So say 35 times 1. So if you compare it with this other one, it was getting the prices of 2020. This one we're getting the prices of the base year. And that's the huge difference. Then we say plus. What is the other one? The other one is, we try to check here. We go for the other product, which is sugar. What's the quantity of sugar? It's 4 in 2020, right? Times the price of sugar in the base year is 3, right? Yeah, the price of sugar in the quantity of sugar in 2020 was 4 times 3. So the price is 3 in the base year. So you say 4 times 3, which will just say 12. Right? So just say plus 4 times 3, then plus the last one will be in 2020 nuts were 50, so just say 50 times 20. And you punch that on the calculator, you get the answer. That is how you find real GDP. Then the next one now just talks about the deflator, and that's the inflation rate in 2021, according to this index. So to find the deflator is just nominal GDP divided by, so the deflator, GDP deflator is equal to nominal GDP. So you just get a nominal GDP, you divide it by the real GDP, then you multiply everything by 100. That's how you find the deflator. Okay. So you get a GDP deflator by that. Okay. I hope that is fine.
Mr. Duncan. So in that case, we have to find the deflator for each year, meaning we have to get the nominal GDP for, I don't know, it's 2020, and then we found the deflator for that. Again, we go to 2021 like that.
Yes. So you go for since you would have already calculated both, right? So for example, for 2020, you calculated the real GDP and the nominal GDP. So get them, divide them. For 2020, get the nominal GDP of 2020 divided by the real GDP of 2020, multiply it by 100. For 2021, we do the same. Okay. And then now the last part says the inflation rate. How do you calculate the inflation? To calculate the inflation using the GDP deflator is just direct. What's the number that we found here? Okay, let's maybe just try to put. So if you, let's say, for example, you find the deflator, and let's say, for example, you find a number such as, let's say 124%. Okay, it's just an example. Let's say we find this is for 2020. Okay, might not be the true one, but let's say, for example, we found 220. So if it's above 100, now one thing that is true is that the deflator, GDP deflator for the base year, okay, for the base year is equal to 100. It will always be 100. So as long as you try to find it, the GDP deflator for the base year to always be equal to what? 100%. And you can try it out. Try it for the base year, get the nominal and real GDP, you find the 100. So we use this as the benchmark. We use the 100 as the benchmark, as the reference point. So if you find a GDP of 124%, that means prices had risen by 24%, because in the base year it's 100. So if it's 124, that means prices have risen by 24%. Therefore, inflation is 24%. So you just get whatever number you found. Let's say in 2020, we found this. And in the base year, we already know it's always 100%. So you just do the 124 minus the 100, which is equal to what? 24. So you say prices, the inflation rate is 24%, like this. But if you found, for example, any number that is less than 100, that means prices are decreased by that amount. Okay? So let's say, for example, here, the inflation was 24%, but let's say, for example, we just found a number such as 74%. This is less than 100, showing you that prices had reduced. So prices reduced by, so 74 minus 100 is what? The gap there should be 20 something. Is it 30 something? Yeah, no, it should be, I think, 20 something. Yeah, so if you have 100 minus 74, yeah, 26. So it means prices had reduced by 26%. Okay. So it depends on whether it's above 100 or less than 100. If it's above 100, it means prices had increased by that amount. If they're below 100, it means that reduced by that amount. So that's how you calculate the inflation rate using the deflator. This one is straightforward. Okay. All right. So that's how you calculate the GDP. Now, I have this one here, the CPI. The CPI is very, very similar to the to the deflator, because how you calculate the CPI is the opposite of how you calculate the real GDP. Remember, real GDP, what were we interested in? We're keeping prices constant, right? We're keeping quantity rather. We're keeping prices constant. We're getting prices for the base year, but we're changing quantity, right? If you remember the formula, if you look up here, I gave this formula for the real GDP, which I said initial, you get the initial price, or you get the price in the base year, then you multiply it by the current quantity. But when you're calculating the CPI for a particular year, let's say the CPI for 2020 is equal to the cost of basket. So the CPI is also another way you can measure the inflation rate. Cost of the basket in current year. So cost of the basket in the current year, in this year, we are going to say 2020, isn't it? Divided by the cost of the basket in the base year. So cost of basket in the base year. Then you multiply this by 100, okay? Then what you're going to have is, what's the cost? Cost just means price times quantity. So price times quantity, it's just this. Summation of price times quantity as well. Here we're going to have the summation of price times quantity. Now this price here, when you're using the CPI, you keep quantities constant, prices current, they change. Okay, then this is the cost of the basket in the base year, then times 100. So I want you to look at this and look at the GDP, the real GDP. It's just the opposite, right? When you're calculating the real GDP, what you're keeping constant is the prices, and you're getting the current prices, the current quantities. But for the CPI, what you get as the cost of the basket, the current, is you keep prices changing, quantities constant. Okay. So no quantities are going to change. The quantities that we're going to get will be the quantities of the base year. So always get quantities of the base year if you're calculating the CPI. Okay, because CPI, we're interested in looking at the changes in inflation. How is inflation changing? How are prices changing rather? So if you want to be interested in how prices are changing, your focus should be to keep prices to be changing, then you keep your quantities constant. Okay, I hope that is okay. It's just a direct opposite. Don't mistaken the two. Okay, so that is all that is there. So we calculate the CPI. This is the formula for the CPI. It's the cost of the basket in the current year divided by the cost of the basket in the base year. So in this case, our base year, we have this year that is here that I've just written base year. So what's the cost of the basket in the base year? Cost of the basket in the base year will just be, sum is 33, right? So you just get 33 times 1. Hope you can see on the right far end. So it's 33 times 1 plus 5 times 3 plus 550 times 20. That is the cost of the basket in the base year. So it's just the normal way we get the nominal GDP for the base year. Now, what is the CPI for, let's say, for example, 2020? So to get the CPI for 2020, you need to get the cost of the basket in 2020 divided by the cost of the basket in the base year. So you first calculate the cost of the basket in the base year, which I've just illustrated by saying 33 times 1 plus 5 times 3 plus 50 times 20, which is on the far right side. That's the cost of the basket in the current year, in the base year. Now, if you want to find the 2020, the cost of the basket in 2020, how are we going to do it? We'll say we're keeping quantities constant, prices are changing. So get the prices of the base year, the quantities of the base year. Prices, you get the current year. So you can see here for SAMP, the prices in 2020 was the price was 22.5. So you're going to get 2.5 times the quantity in the base year, which is 33. So you're going to say 2.5 times 33 plus sugar. What's the price of sugar in 2020? It's 5 times the quantity in the base year of sugar is 5. So you do 5 times 5. Then for nuts, you're also going to get the quantity of nuts in 2020 is, the price rather. The price is 22. Quantity in the base year, you go for the base year. It's 50. So we'll say 22 times 50. That is the cost of the basket in 2020. Get the current prices multiplied by the constant prices, which is the opposite of what we're doing in GDP when you're calculating real GDP. So you can just know one of them, just know when you're finding the real GDP, if you're calculating the nominal, the CPI, when you're getting the cost of the basket, it is the opposite of what we do with real GDP. Okay. That's how you calculate the CPI. Anybody behind? All good?
And this one, it requires at least to go through, we have to revise it.
I don't want you to go. There's no time to revise this one.
It's a bit confusing, this one, Mr. Danke.
Okay. I said,
Just send it.
yes, but I said, I know probably I'm also tired, but when you're just calculating the CPI, I've said the formula is the cost of the the CPI is equal to, so the CPI, for example, 2020 is equal to the cost of the basket in 2020 divided by the cost of the basket in the base year. So what's the cost of the basket in 2020? Now the cost of the basket is equal to in 2020, so it means you get the summation, which is the same way that we've been doing, right? Of price times quantity. But this time we're getting the current price and the initial quantity divided by the summation of the cost of the basket in the base year, right? So just say P times Q, then you say times 100. So now let's get the base year in 2020. We're calculating for 2020, right? So let's get the cost of the basket in 2020. So the cost of the basket in 2020, if you look from here, we have sump, right? So sump, the quantities, we get the price, right? So the price is 2.5. So I write 2.5. And then what's the quantity? The quantity I need to get from the base year. So to be 2.5 times the base year is 33. The base year quantity is 33. So we say 2.5 times 33. So we say 2.5 times 33. Then we say plus, what's the price? Again, we go back. So remember, prices you get for the current year, quantities for the base year. So you look at prices. We look at the now sugar. What's the current sugar? The current price of sugar is 5 kwacha. So the current price is 5 kwacha. Then what's the quantity of sugar in the base year? In the base year, this is the sugar is here. It's 5. So we're going to say 5 times 5. Are you okay now? So say 5 plus 5 times 5. And then we say plus, what's the other one? The other thing remaining? We have the, with the nuts, right?
Is it not 4 times 5?
No, remember I'm saying prices. Get the current price, multiply by the quantity in the base year.
Okay.
So for nuts now, we're going to get, what's the current price? For the current price is 22, right? Which is this one I've highlighted, times you get the quantity for the base year, which is the quantity here is 50. So we'll say 22 times 50. Okay.
Okay.
So you're going to say 22 times 50. That is the cost of the basket in the current year. Then divided by the cost of the basket now in the base year. So in the base year now, you just, for the cost of the basket in the base year, you just get, it's the normal way. The normal way you get the nominal GDP. So then if the cost of the basket in the base year, you get 33 times 1, and then we have 5 times 3, 50 times 20. The normal way you're getting the nominal GDP for the base year. Okay. So it means if we punch this on the calculator, we have 33 times 1. So let me just write 33 times 1 plus 5 times 3 plus 50 times 20. Okay, which is giving me 1,048 kwacha. 1,048. So this one is giving me 1,048. So I said everything you multiply by 100. So it means this will be equal to, the top part will give me 2.5 times 33 plus 5 times 5 plus 22 times 50, which is giving me 12. So 1,200 like this, I think it's 0.5 divided by the 1048, then multiplied by 100. So what's the answer we're getting? That divided by 1048 is 1.1, then times 100, it's giving us 115. So this is 115.2194. So I can just say this is 1.15.2322, rounding off to 2 decimal places. So this is my CPI. It's not a percentage. It's an index number. So you just leave it like that without any units. Then you do the same for all of them. Okay, but you can just run through this video again, and at least I want you to master this one. Then now to calculate the inflation rate. So this is a CPI. for 2020. So you also get the CPI for 2021 using the same way, the same formula. Now, when you get the CPIs for all the years, let's say, for example, you want to calculate CPI, you want to calculate inflation using the CPI, if they say inflation rate in 2020. So the formula is CPI in 2020 minus the initial year was 2019, isn't it? Minus CPI of the initial year, which in this case we'll say for 2019, but we don't have, divided by the CPI in the initial year as well. In this case is 2019, then times 100. Well, the answer you get is the inflation rate. Okay. So that's how you find the inflation. So just know, go back how to find the real GDP. When you know how to find your real GDP, just tell yourself it's the opposite. Where there is the prices were constant, now this one will be constant. All right, and that is all on how you calculate the CPI. It's very much simple. Get some rest, watch it while you are very active, then you should be able to get it. Okay, otherwise that is all. How you calculate inflation.
You can take it to the question for a second, Duncan. I just want to see something.
Yeah, the question is here. Sorry. Yeah.
I want you to come down a bit.
Down?
Yes. No. On the same
Up?
question, just bring the table a bit down because
Just
I can't
here?
see.
This is the
No,
up?
going up. I mean,
This?
yes. Yes. Now take it to your answer.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So please just know this is how you find the CPI, and it's a must. I would love you to really find the CPI. And then once you find the CPI, how you use the CPI to measure inflation is you say CPI in the current year minus the CPI in the previous year divided by the CPI in the previous year, then times 100. The answer you find is the inflation rate. Okay. Yeah. Then I think the rest which are down just talks about the CPI for 2021 and the inflation rate according to the index with reference to the base year. Okay, you know the base year. Yeah.
The one we are just from calculating is question number C.
Yeah, if there's a question, yeah, for C, which tells us to find the CPI. Since for the first one, we did the GDP deflator, right? Of which the GDP deflator just told you it's current the nominal GDP times divided by the real GDP times 100. That's nominal GDP, right? And you just check whether it's above 100 or not. Then for the CPI, you calculate the CPI for the current year minus the CPI for the initial year. So you can see there that if the CPI for 2021 and the inflation rate according to this index with the reference to the base year. So it means when you're calculating the CPI for 2021, you're going to refer to this time instead of saying the CPI for the current year, since they have said according to this index with reference to the base year. So it means it will be CPI for the current year minus the CPI of the initial year, in this case is 2020. Then you find the prices. Whatever answer you're going to get, you're going to say prices with reference to the base year increased by this amount. Okay, now if they have, I'm sure you've put this, let me just correct it. Since they have said with reference to the base year, that means your initial year will be the base year. Okay, because they have said with reference to the base year. But if they just told you calculate the CPI for 2021, it means you'd have gotten CPI for 2021 minus the CPI for 2020 because it's the previous year. But this one they have said with the reference to the base year. So you say 2021, the CPI for 2021 minus the CPI for the base year divided by the CPI for the base year, because the base year here will be in our previous year. Okay, but if they don't include anything to say with reference to the base year, then you just find it with the initial year.
So in this case, the base year can't be 2021.
They always tell you which one is the best year, and in this case they have specified this is the best year that we have here, of which we don't know this year. They just put best year. So sometimes they will give you
Okay.
three of them, let's say 2020, 2021, and 2019. And they tell you take 2019 as your best year. And then they can ask you like that. So if they say with reference to the best year, put the best year there. All right. Then for this other one, I have the difference between the CPI and the GDP. I have a small table that I feel I'll share with you after the class. Then you can look at it. There are quite a number of differences that are there. All right. Okay. I think we're good, right? This is
Then E and F.
sorry, no, these are just under inflation. I believe you can look at these. What are the effects of inflation? We looked at this one. Effects,
Thank you.
yeah. Measures of inflation. Give 5 measures that you can give to remedy inflation. Here, they have not even specified. So you can use whichever, maybe you want Keynesians or use the other one. So what are some of the cures of inflation? You can reduce money supply. You can look at the demand pull inflation. How can you cure demand pull inflation? You carry out contraction of fiscal policy, isn't it? So you can say reduce taxes, increase taxes. Okay, anything that will cause the AD to fall will be a cure to inflation. If you're using a cost pull inflation, anything that will reduce the cost of production for the firm. So you can talk about better transport infrastructure. You can talk about lowering the minimum wage. Those things will lower the cost of the firm. Those are the things that they're looking for when you're looking at that, okay? All right, I believe we're all good now. So this should give you a test.
Yeah.
There's nothing that is dramatic about every question that is coming. So just aim to understand what I've given you and what we learned in class. Don't underestimate, don't undervalue what you have. Know that you have got the right thing. Don't doubt. Yeah, you've seen that we had written the most of the quizzes together and stuff. Even the questions that you have now, you are able to answer them. All right. So, but don't just undermine what you have. Know you've got it right and you're all ready for the test. Okay. And the exam. All right. Unless there's a question, I think I'm retiring.
Thank you.
Okay, we just pray, Father. Thank you for the class that we had. I give you praise and honor for this revision. I pray that, Lord, may you help each and every one of these, Lord, to understand more deeply, Heavenly Father, over everything that we have done today. And I pray that, Lord, you will guide them as they'll be writing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.